My name is Andy, and there are roughly 300 million dogs on this planet right now that nobody owns. No vet, no food bowl, no Instagram account their owner runs for them. And here's what's wild. They're winning. Not just surviving, actually winning. Dodging rush hour traffic, finding food before the garbage trucks do, forming their own social groups, and outsmarting animal control programs that cost governments millions of dollars every year. In some cities, they're using the subway. Now, there is one thing about stray dogs that scientists stumbled on almost by accident, something backed by real research that most people have never heard of, and that once you know it, completely changes how you see this whole story. We'll get there. But first, we need to understand exactly what kind of survival machine these animals have quietly become, because it is not what you'd expect. Let's start with the number that almost nobody talks about: 300 million stray dogs worldwide right now. That's a population almost the same size as the entire United States, except this population has no health care, no grocery stores, no safety net of any kind, and absolutely nobody filing paperwork on their behalf. And yet, they eat every single day. Here's what makes this strange from a science perspective. Dogs didn't evolve despite humans. They evolved because of us. About 15,000 years ago, wolves started hanging around early human settlements, drawn in by leftover food and warmth. Over thousands of years, that slowly turned into something biological. Dogs developed the ability to read human faces, to understand when we point at something, to match our routines and sleep schedules. No other animal on Earth did that. Dogs are literally the only species that evolved to look to us as their main social anchor. So think about what happens when that anchor disappears, when the one species your whole biology was built around suddenly isn't there anymore. You'd expect these animals to fall apart, to go dysfunctional, to just not cope. What actually happens is something researchers are still trying to fully wrap their heads around. Here's an assumption worth throwing straight in the trash: that living in a city is somehow easier for a stray dog. Food scraps everywhere, sheltered corners, people dropping French fries on the sidewalk. The data does not agree. Research tracking stray dog populations across multiple countries found that the average stray dog lives 3 to 5 years. A pet dog lives 12 to 15. You're looking at a gap of nearly a decade in an environment we'd casually call resource-rich. Why? Because the city is genuinely brutal for an animal with no protection. Traffic is the obvious one. Then there's disease, viruses spreading fast through animals living close together, sharing water sources, eating from the same dump sites. On top of that, there's the cold, the heat, the territorial fights. But here's the part that really stands out. Scientists who measured stress hormones in stray dogs compared to pet dogs living in the same city found that strays had elevated stress levels as a permanent baseline, not when they were scared, not when something attacked them, just always as a default setting. Think about what that actually means. We know from decades of human health research that living in a constant low-level state of stress wears the body down fast. It messes with sleep, immune function, memory, and decision-making. We have an entire wellness industry worth billions of dollars, built around helping people lower their baseline stress. Stray dogs are just living in it every day. No spa day coming. Here's where the story takes a hard left turn with dogs. Because despite everything we just covered, stray dogs have developed mental abilities that are honestly a little embarrassing for us to acknowledge. Researchers studying stray dogs in India found something fascinating when they tested how these animals respond to human cues. When a human pointed toward hidden food, pet dogs just followed the point. They trusted it. Simple. Stray dogs also followed the point, but they did something extra first. Before acting on any human signal, they ran a quick check on the human. Is this person trustworthy? What's their posture? Have I seen them before? Do they seem safe? And then, only if the human passed that check, they followed the cue. That's not just an animal reacting. That's an animal making a judgment call about who to listen to before deciding whether to listen at all. Stray dogs have basically developed a built-in people filter. But it gets better, because stray dogs aren't just reading humans, they're reading cities. Studies across multiple urban populations show that strays build detailed mental maps of their neighborhoods, not just where things are, but when. They know which restaurants put trash out at 11 p.m., which market stalls close at dusk and leave scraps behind. which streets get busier at certain times, and which ones go quiet. And then there's the example that always stops people cold. In Moscow, researchers documented stray dogs that figured out how to ride the subway. Not randomly, strategically. They'd board specific lines, ride to neighborhoods with good feeding spots, and come back later in the day. We spent billions building that metro system for ourselves. They just quietly added themselves to the commute. No ticket, no metro card. No one to tell them they couldn't. Quick question, what do you think a group of ownerless, untrained dogs living on city streets actually looks like socially? Chaos. Every dog for itself. Pure anarchy with fur. Not even close. Studies looking at stray dog groups in Romania, Brazil, Thailand, and elsewhere found something called fission-fusion social structure, which is a fancy science term for a very specific way of organizing a group. The same structure, by the way, that elephants use, and dolphins, and chimpanzees. Here's how it works in plain English. The pack has a stable core group, but membership is fluid. Dogs split off to go find food on their own, then come back to the group later. Information about good food spots gets shared through scent and body language. The group defends territory together, and there's a clear social hierarchy. But it's not maintained through constant fighting. It's maintained through social awareness. The dog at the top of a stray pack is almost never the biggest or most aggressive one. Research consistently shows it's the one that reads the group best, that knows when tension is building, who needs what, and how to keep things from falling apart. In human management research, we call a version of this emotional intelligence, and companies spend enormous amounts of money trying to train their leaders to have it. Stray dogs developed it because, for them, getting the social dynamics wrong isn't a bad quarter, it's a death sentence. Now, let's zoom into the United States specifically, because America has its own version of this story, and it is very, very American. On the surface, the US doesn't have a stray dog problem on the scale of India or Eastern Europe. But that's a bit like saying your house doesn't have a flooding problem because all the water is in the basement. The ASPCA estimates roughly 3 to 4 million dogs enter U.S. shelters every year. About 390,000 are euthanized annually. That number has dropped significantly over the past 2 decades, which is genuinely good news. But it's still 390,000 animals. And the geography of this matters. The states with the highest stray and surrender rates, Mississippi, Louisiana, Alabama, New Mexico, are also among the poorest states in the country. Research published in an academic journal studying human-animal relationships found that economic hardship is one of the strongest predictors of people giving up their pets. Not because they stopped caring, because when housing falls through, or a medical bill lands, or a job disappears, the pet is often what the system doesn't have room for. So in America, the stray dog story is less about dogs riding subway trains, and more about what happens when people and animals both fall through the same cracks at the same time. Here's the kicker though. The US spends an estimated $2 billion a year on animal control. And most of it goes toward reacting, picking up animals, processing them, managing shelters, not toward the prevention strategies that research consistently shows actually reduce the problem over time. $2 billion. Running the most expensive version of a strategy science says has limited long-term effectiveness, which is, as a country, extremely on brand for us. Okay, time to come back to the thing from the beginning. The behavior researchers discovered almost by accident. In 2021, animal behavior scientists in Hungary ran an experiment. They played recorded sounds of a human crying, and they played it near stray dogs. Animals with no owner, no training, no treat waiting for them if they did the right thing. The strays heard it, and they turned toward it. Many of them moved closer to where the sound was coming from. A significant number showed what the researchers described as comfort-directed behavior, lowering their posture, slowing down, positioning themselves near the source of the crying. They were, by every behavioral measure, trying to help. These are animals that spend every single day solving their own survival, chronically stressed, running a constant mental calculation of where the next meal is and which human is safe to approach. And when they heard distress, they stopped all of that and moved toward it. The researchers' explanation was that this is likely a deeply embedded evolutionary response, so deeply wired into the species from 15,000 years of living alongside humans that not even abandonment could fully turn it off. That's the science. Those are the facts. But just let that sit for a second. Real quick, because this deserves a straight answer, what does actually work? For decades, the default approach to stray dog populations was removal. Catch them, cull them, clear the area. Simple in theory. Except there's one problem: it doesn't hold. Dogs are territorial animals. Remove a pack, and new dogs move into that same space within weeks. The math just resets. The World Health Organization flagged this back in the early 2000s and recommended moving away from culling as a primary strategy. Yet it's still common practice in many places. What the evidence actually supports is TNVR: trap, neuter, vaccinate, return. Italy made this national policy back in 1991. Long-term studies from that program show stabilized dog populations, less disease spread, and fewer conflicts between dogs and people, fewer bites, less territorial aggression, less chaos overall. In the U.S., cities like San Antonio and Austin have run return to field and TNVR programs and seen real reductions in shelter intake over time. The science isn't complicated. The gap is in getting the policy to catch up with what the research already knows. Here's a way to think about everything we just covered. Imagine you were designed at a biological level to live with someone. Your whole system built around their presence, their voice, their schedule, their warmth. And then one day, that's just gone. No explanation, no replacement, just the street. Most of us, if we're honest, would not handle that gracefully. But these animals, 300 million of them, looked at the city that wasn't built for them, the traffic that didn't slow down for them, the system that largely forgot about them, and they just started solving it. Block by block, day by day. They mapped the food. They read the humans. They built communities. They figured out the subway, for crying out loud. And then, in a quiet little study that most people will never hear about, scientists played the sound of a human crying near a stray dog. An animal with every reason to keep its head down and focus on itself. And it walked toward the sound. Not because it was supposed to, not because anyone was watching, just because somewhere in whatever a dog is made of, that response is still there, still running, still intact after thousands of years and all the ways we've let them down. That's the story of stray dogs in cities, not one of tragedy, not one of chaos, one of a species that was handed a situation it didn't ask for and got incredibly, stubbornly, almost unreasonably good at handling it. And somewhere on a sidewalk right now, one of them is already 3 steps ahead of tomorrow.